To the left.
We begin today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Woolastock We. These territories are covered by treaties of peace and friendship of the Woolastock We people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. I now call our meeting to order, time 6:30. Attendance has been taken. Yes. Yeah, approval of the agenda.
Bob Bell, Mato.
Second, Dave Morrison, Hamel.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Are there any conflict of interest for disclosure this evening? So we'll go number 5, approve of the minutes, May the 7th.
Motion to approve the minutes from May the 7th, Dave Morrison.
I'll second it, David Nicholson.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Approve the minutes from May 23rd.
David Sweeney.
Second by,
David Haber.
any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And approve the minutes from June the 27th.
David Haber.
Dave Morrison, second.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Move now to consent agenda. Introduction of the consent agenda. I will bring forward the items that are listed under consent agenda. Number A, Public Safety Committee reports. B, Community Development Committee reports. C, Economic Expansion Committee reports. D, Regional Infrastructure reports. E, Finance Committee quarterly report. F, Tenders report, information only. So now we have an opportunity to remove items. Before the motion to adopt the consent agenda is made, I will ask if any directors around the table want any items to remove from the consent agenda for separate discussion and vote. And also those online. Director Marty, Forsyth.
I think finance, anything to do with finance should be on a consent agenda.
Should be on the regular agenda.
Should be on a consent that we just voted. Has to be read.
I'm not sure. So,
So Madam Chair, in that case, the Finance Committee quarterly report comes off the consent agenda.
okay,
And then would be dealt with as
They're
items.
under finance.
so we will remove the finance committee quarterly report. And it'll come down, we'll discuss before the finance committee report. Okay, is there,
I have one other question on a lot of them on the consent agenda in the whole. You can do the consent agenda, so we don't have 2 minutes and everything else. That could be all included in the consent agenda, so we only have one nomination and move it forward. So we don't have to do the minutes. We get the minutes, we read the minutes, we know the minutes, and something else, we bring it up, but that can be all put under the consent agenda.
Take one of your advice.
So, yeah, that's true. For another meeting, we could do that.
sure, okay. Okay, is there anyone else?
Dave Morrison, I move to receive the reports identified in the consent agenda with the exclusion of the Finance Committee report.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Margaret Forsyth, second.
Any discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. So now before we go to number 7, the finance committee report, we will do number E, the finance committee quarterly report. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's what we were gonna do anyway.
So. Hey,
Finance Committee Report number 1. Finance Committee met on July 25th, 2024. The meeting was called to order at 12 p.m. Ms. Fitzgerald summarized the performance of the investment portfolio for the second quarter of 2024. See the attached report. Investments had a growth of 1.1% in the second quarter and 6.17% year to date. Annualized, this equates to 16.25% growth which is well above targeted amounts of 424. Chair is then providing an outlook of the future regarding investments. A major driver in the market is inflation, which has waned, so with interest rates coming down, it should have a positive impact on the investment. Having a higher allocation in fixed income is good currently and future looks positive. Ms. Langdon presented the financial results of the first half of 2024. Two funds were currently producing small deficits: economic development and sport, recreation, and cultural infrastructure due to higher than budgeted expenses. All other funds have produced healthy surpluses, but typically the second half of the year has more activity than the first, so it would be expected that these surpluses may decrease in the coming months. Staff provided an update on the budget process. The budget is well underway. Committees have been engaged to determine their priorities for 2025, so they can be factored into the budget. Staff expect to be able to bring a budget to Finance Committee in mid-August, which is time for additional meetings for the committee to understand and fine-tune the budget before it is forwarded to the board. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 12:41 p.m. I move that the board receive the report of the Finance Committee dated September 2024.
Second by,
Dave Morrison, second.
any discussion? Any further questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Well, you just give me a moment and I will make my way to the next panels. So,
That's yours. Yeah.
Finance Committee report number 2, September 5th, 2024. The Finance Committee met on 2 occasions to arrive at its recommendations for a draft budget to be forwarded to members of the commission. The first meeting was held August 15th, 2024. Present for Richard Ford, Chair, David Haley, David Pixie, Ken Fox, Kate Rogers, John Smith, CEO, Don Fitzgerald, Brett McCray, and Ken Langson, and Lonnie Forbes. The meeting was called to order by the chair at 12:02. The chair provided background regarding the letter he received from Director Rogers with respect to cost apportionment. He chose to bring the letter to the committee. I chose to bring the letter to the committee to determine the next steps. Director Rogers provided a summary of the letter, and each member of the committee shared their thoughts on the services the commission is providing and how costs for each member are calculated, which is specified in legislation. This letter will be referred to the board for them to determine next steps, if any are advisable. Following the discussion, Director Rogers left the meeting as she had another commitment. CEO Smith gave an overview of the activities that the commission has undertaken and what is anticipated for 2025. CFO Langton presented the budget in detail for each fund, and staff highlighted what is driving increases or decreases from the previous year's budget attached to the report. Overall member charges for the new mandated services would increase $377,059, which is made possible through the increased regional service support fund and the second year of previous surpluses. For participating members, planning and development charges will increase $173,771. No tipping fee change is recommended for solid waste. Staff responded to questions from the committee members. It was decided that another meeting of the committee be held to further discuss and digest the budget. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 2:29. The committee met again on August 22nd. The meeting was called to order by the chair at 12 p.m. Chair provided a summary of the budget. I see it as a good news budget with member charges down 15% for new services and increased regional service support funding. Langton presented one-page summary of the budget, see attached. This gives an overview of all of the items that are driving the budget in 2025. The committee was then given the opportunity to have each funds budget presented again to ask any questions they might have on the budget. There was discussion around the addition of the new position in corporate services, with 2 committee members feeling this was not necessary, and 3 committee members being in support of this contract position. There is also concern expressed by 1 member around the 15,000 added to the tourism promotion and economic development budgets at the request of the committee, as it was believed those activities should be provided by the service providers. The majority of committee members were in favor of including the additional 15,000 in the respective budgets. As the majority of the committee members were in favor of the budget presented, with 2 members disagreeing with certain aspects, it was decided that this budget would be forwarded to the board for presentation. The dissenting members were encouraged to express their opinions at the board meeting. There being no further business, the meeting was adjourned at 12:52 p.m. I move that the board receive the report of the finance committee dated September 5th, 2024.
Any discussion?
Just one concern, it was, our chair read it as increased by 377,000 on the first page.
Yes,
It's printed right, he just made a mistake.
I had it circled too, yes, so noted. Any further discussion? Yes,
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up or expand further on Chair Corey's our discussion, the committee's discussion about the letter that was sent by the city. And we had a discussion at the committee and it was to be brought to the board, and I'm just wondering if there would be an opportunity, if we could identify when that moment might occur. I've spoken to CEO about it earlier. And he was indicating that it could take place in a future meeting, but I think it will be helpful if that future meeting or even within part of the budget discussion is taking place. That's fall, so it's not tonight, the next meeting agenda.
which one you would like to address?
You go ahead, Director Corey, and then I'll.
So from the committee's point of view and my point of view, because the letter was addressed to me. That will be a decision of the chair and CEO as they create future agenda. It's not on tonight's agenda, so it's not, from my point of view, it wasn't up for discussion tonight. To just bring it on the report. The letter is there and yeah, I guess that's all I was saying. I don't want to start the debate.
Okay, no, did you have anything to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, through you to the members, yes, Director Corey is correct. And what we will do is when we're setting the agenda for the next meeting or the meeting subsequent, we will certainly take that into consideration. And tonight was to purely receive the report and recognize that the letter was presented at the Finance Committee meeting. And we've done that, and then we'll move on to the next part of it if the report is agreed and is adopted by the board.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I was just asking that it be brought forward to an agenda, a board agenda during our budget deliberation period, which I know will go beyond tonight.
Yes.
Right, obviously, wishful thinking that it's not, but so I'm hoping that it could happen as part of those discussions. So it's subsequent meeting in the next month or two. I guess I knew it wasn't going to be tonight to the chair for his point.
Right, and we'll make note of that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further question? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Now we have the one. We accepted the report.
If that the next month. Motion on page 3.
Well, we haven't got to that yet.
Okay.
No, that will come after we discuss the draft budget. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes, that comes at the end.
Okay, so. All right. I just assumed we would do the draft budget on the question.
No, because we're gonna look at the budget first.
Yeah. So,
Okay,
fine.
yes, okay, so we're moving on.
Both are okay, but that's good.
Yes, yeah, and I have it at the end of the draft as well. So now we'll move on to the finance committee, consideration of the 2025 draft budget.
So. Before you may want to say a few words, and then I'll say a few words, and
Okay.
Mary Kay will lead us through
Say
the,
a few words.
we'll say a few more words. Yes.
So, as we listen to this presentation, and I have previously thanked Mary Kay for the hard work that she's going to do tonight to walk us through this, so. But there are some budget highlights that really I want to pull out. One is that member charges for new services, and I really want to emphasize this now because I got it in the correct. They have decreased by 377,000. So the bills each of us receive around the table will be down by 15%. Main costs will go through regional service support fund and the previous year's surpluses. So it's a good thing, but it's a little tenuous. And it may not look the same next year. It's good for this year. The total regional services support fund for 2025 is 2.8 million. For 2024, it was 1.9 million. That is a significant increase that's been negotiated and should be appreciated because it helps to bring a lot of our costs down. No change in the tipping fee, remains at $104 a ton. Participating member charges for planning and development increased by 173,000, but really that brings the rate down year over year. So the rate that's costing us in our mill rate is actually down year over year. So that's good news as well. And the drivers were board costs reflect the actual cost of meetings being held, and we do need a lot. So it's going to be more cost. And we're establishing a modest public relations budget. The rental costs for the new office need to be considered. They're there, they're real, we're going to be moving. So we're going to have to pay the rent as we do that. There is a recommendation of one additional contract employee for 2025, a governance officer to see how that works out. There are the contracts with Ignite and Tourism Fredericton. No surprises there. There are CPI adjustments as the agreements say. And there is an establishing small amounts of professional service funding to be used as well. So all in all, I think it's a pretty good budget for our first real budget. And then the first one that we've crafted without influence of government and the leftovers from the year before. So thank you. John?
Thank you, Director Perry. And Madam Chair, through you to the members, I want to thank each and every one of you for the opportunity to present this budget, the proposed budget for 2025 for the Capital Region Service Commission. I want to thank Mary Kay and particularly and the senior team here at the commission for all their hard work and dedication. Just to give you a little example of the work and the effort that has to undergo when we talk about assistance and helping and needing one more employee or trying one for a year on a contract. We did our regional services support fund application. We got good news on that today. So everything that you see in Mary Kay's presentation this evening would be acceptable by the government of New Brunswick to utilize that funding. We're one of the first ones out of the gate to get approved. We got good at it because last year Mary Kay led the process, working with our economic coordinator to help develop this with the senior team. And we got better at this. Still took 20, anywhere between 35 to 40 hours to complete that whole process. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of work, a lot of effort in those things. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes that people never see that happen, and it just happens organically and then lands here on your desk and and then we talk about it. So over the past year we've seen personal cost of living skyrocketing, what are still, even though inflation's starting to come down, interest rates are starting to come down. There was a report out on the media today where 64% of Canadians were concerned about having an additional unexpected expense in their lives. There was a high percentage of people worried about feeding their families moving forward. So we understand all of that. And so, but during this time of all this change, new mandated services, efforts being made, trying to work smarter, not harder, do more with less, that type of thing. Your staff have heard you, your team has heard you. This is your professional staff in this office here today, and all the people that work in this building down at the Regional Solid Waste Division. That's your team. And yes, I'm your only employee, but we all work together as one and as a team to develop this. And the reality is, we heard you, where people kept talking about, we want to pay less, we want more, we want better use of the Regional Services Support Fund. We want to access better and greater funding through the government of New Brunswick. We're doing all those things, and you'll see that in the budget here this evening. And the team has done a great job. As I said at the July 26th forum, we're being contacted more and more as a central point of coordination and leadership for the region, whether it's physician recruitment, whether it's on business development, whether it's on the infrastructure. Now is at our next economic expansion meeting. Director, and last one we had agriculture, and we're inviting everyone from around the region, all entities to participate. Lots of things being done on that end. And this year, all of your budgets, all of these were developed by with input from the committees. So everybody would have known that these are being developed and this is what's moving forward for the committees that they're on and the committees that they support. So they were all done in that way. Some of them maybe a little quicker than others, some of them a little longer than others, but we did it in a way that we could feel that we were supported. So this is the Finance Committee's budget. At this point, staff have, it was adopted by the Finance Committee to bring it forward to the board. Now it's the Finance Committee's budget to bring it to the board this evening, and then it's for the board to publish for the next 45 days in a public way. So, you know, we look around planning and development, more and more effort being placed out of their particular work with Lonnie and the team. Under the new under some of the new legislation, section 108 of the Community Planning Act, we have to review all development, all the development and planning permits for the region, with the exception of those who do not use that service. And this has been taking a lot of time to become compliant in that. We're now online permitting. We're trying to get more efficient, more proactive, but we're also out there working and listening. Our solid waste division, we've invested in technology. We've gone out and sought funding through the government to invest in some of that technology and try to make that work to help with gas sensing equipment and order sensing. And this also leads to greater development through the processes that Brett has explained to us on several occasions to develop further gas extraction from the solid waste division. So a lot of great things coming. We look around all our committees. We've got great work happening right across the board on all committees. And whether that be public safety or community development or, economic expansion, whatever the committee is, they're all doing great work and there's a lot of work being done. And we're not asking for a fortune here. We've actually lowered as Director Corey said, the member contributions this year. And I think hopefully that's good news for all of you. Anyway, thank you, Madam Chair, and I wish Mary Kay the best.
Thanks, John. So I'm going to take you through the actual detail of the budget. Director Corey did an excellent job in providing the overview. You can see on the next slide, so I'm not going to go over that again, but overall, we do feel this is a good news budget with our member charges coming down for our new services, and that's what you're going to see on this slide right here. So these are the 7 funds that we have that we consider the new services. They're the new mandated services. So it doesn't include planning and development, all of these. So when you look across the board, you can see this is what the member charges will for each one. This is our contribution that was required in 2024. This is what this budget proposes for 2025. So overall, there is the decrease of $377,000. And it ranges from the smallest decrease to Tracy, which is $873, to $210,000 decrease for the city of Fredericton. Now, we have to be careful because the Regional Service Delivery Act specifies how we can charge out these member charges. So for tourism promotion and economic development, it's based on your member share of the tax base. For all the other services that you see up here, it's based 50% on the member share of the tax base 50% based on the share of the population. So that's specified in legislation, and that's how we have to construct our budget. And what this does is it ensures individuals in different communities pay equally for the RSC tax that we have. So the first budget that we're going to look at tonight is corporate services. And you've heard me say this numerous times, but corporate services doesn't have a revenue source. What it is, it consists solely of expenses that support the entire commission. So it's not specific to a division. So the way that those expenses are paid for is they get allocated out to the various divisions. And so what you're going to see when we go through the various divisions budget, there's a line that says allocation from corporate services. And that's these expenses coming into those specific fund budgets in order to be paid for. So the drivers of what's increasing in 2025 in our corporate services budget is we've included one additional contract employee, which is titled the governance officer, which would assist with the board and the committee meetings as well, as we are seeing an increase in the level of staff time that's required there. We've also increased our board costs to reflect the actual number of meetings for board meetings and committee meetings that are being held. We've established a public relations budget because we previously had one that was very small, and we had some that was being funded through transition funding from environment and local government. That's gone away, so we've established our own budget for 2025, and we've included rental costs for a new office space in 2025. So those are what you're going to see when we go through the details of what is actually driving the 2025 budget. So if you look at the top line, you'll see salaries and benefits. For 2025, the budget is $1,299,000. That's an increase of $106,000 from the previous year's budget. So as I mentioned, that includes one additional contract employee for a term, plus CPI increases for the remaining staff. On the governance side of things, we have a budget of $120,000. That's just under a $30,000 increase from the previous year's budget. That reflects the actual number of committee meetings that are being held, plus the CPI adjustment for the board honorariums. And then we've included amounts for meetings, for external forums of the board, like we held at the Blue Conference Center. And we've also increased the amount for training and development, which will allow for learning opportunities for the board as we go forward. On the administration side, we have a total budget for 2025 of $428,000. That's $130,000 increase from the previous year's budget. If you look up at the detail, you can see we have that public relations budget that we've established of $20,000. Our rent is $137,500. And the other increase would be to HST, which is just a factor of the other expenses that are increasing. So we have some modest increases, the major ones being the increase to public relations and rent, for an overall increase of $130,000 from the previous year. So total corporate services budget for 2025 would be $1,847,000, up $266,000 from the previous year. As I mentioned, this budget then is going to be allocated out to the divisions. So when we go through the division's budget and you see that allocation from corporate services and you wonder, why is it up so much from the previous year? Think one additional staff member, increased board costs, rental costs. That's what's driving the increase in those fund budgets. And I think if it's okay, I'll just pause with each one and see if there's any questions.
I have one, the rent increase, when will that start? Like when will we take possession of the other building?
Madam Chair, through you to the members, we're looking at that space right now. We're looking, as we had told the board previously, we would look to call a special meeting once we have an agreement in draft that the board could look at and reflect on. And we have that. It's, in terms that we're looking at probably sometime in October or November of this year is what we would like to try to achieve. And we would bring that forward. There'd be very little additional cost in this year. That would be a January 1st cost primarily.
Thank you. Yes,
We are looking just for questions now, not comments. Is that correct? So we didn't.
You got a comment? You can share it with us.
Oh, okay, sure. So I do have a question first. It's about the board, the per diems. Is it, I don't know if it's set out, is that determined by each regional service commission, how it is that board per diems are funded? Or is that something that is regulated in?
Madam Chair, the honorariums are in our bylaws. They're regulated as to how they increase, how they each year with CPI adjustments. And it is a decision of the board as a collective at an annual general meeting within that. So there was some talk about it last year. The annual meeting kind of came and went, and it wasn't an issue that was raised for any kind of consideration. And then so we continued on. But certainly if someone wanted to raise it for the next annual general meeting, that would require a significant bylaw change and agreement by the full board in terms of that.
I only raise it, and I know that it's something we can deal with during the budget process, but I raise it again because it's, as it increases, as the number of meetings that we participate in increases and the per diems go up, it just, you know, we all see the numbers. Fredericton plays the lion's share of a lot of our budget and of this budget, and it just feels odd to me to be paying. I feel we're all here representing our communities, and our communities should be funding us being here. I guess that's the way, and I know that this is a budget discussion, but I'm raising it because that is one of the amounts that has increased. And it just, it still doesn't sit right with me, so it's something that I will make sure that gets raised.
And through you, Madam Chair, with all due respect, Director Rogers, the whole premise of the funding is on fair and equitable treatment to each community. So Jane in downtown Tracy stays the same as Jane in downtown Fredericton, just Fredericton has more Janes. If, you know, in terms of that, I just wanted, you know, just.
I understand.
Just on that, everybody is paying a fair and equal share. Just some communities have more population, and that's what's in the other.
I just think when I give my time, I'm here because because of my role in the city of Fredericton, so I think it makes sense that the city of Fredericton pays for my time here. I would just, and I just wonder if other directors feel similarly. So, that's not a discussion for now, but I felt the point to raise it was an increase. One question that I do have though is about, I have concern with the new position, and again, I don't know if it's appropriate to do it or if we want to finish the budget and people then comment on the overall budget. Because I don't want to interfere with your presentation, but it is a comment. I would like us to have a discussion about it.
Okay, yes, that can come later. Director Fox.
Yeah, further to the honorarium discussion. I don't know boxes and like kick the sides of the boxes, so what would prevent? What would keep the honorariums the way you want them, or what would prevent the commission from paying those honorariums back to the community in which the representative came from? So the honorariums are paid, but they're paid back to the municipality if that's the way that the particular municipality wants to do it. So, for example, in Norfolk Noble, if I don't care if I'm paid to come here and represent my municipality, that goes back to my municipality. So what we're paying in towards that is coming back as well. What would prevent that? Because it covers your bylaws, but it's still.
Do you want to respond to that?
Sure.
I mean, it would take some consent by the individuals around this table that they defer their honorarium to go back to the municipality.
So, if the board collectively chose to do that, they could. That such an agreement would be binding on all members. Some members may wish to donate their honorarium back to the community themselves, and there's nothing that prevents that from happening. And then that would allow directors to use individual choice. But if it was the collective view that they go back to the municipality, that could happen.
That would be a discussion for another meeting, right? Yes. Okay, so your comments so noted. Any more comments?
Director Corey?
No, it was, I mean, just, I'm emphasizing John's point is that any one of us can do that anytime we feel like it, then we can get a tax receipt.
Derek or Kevin, do you have anything to add at this time? Okay. Carry on, please.
Okay, so that brings us to the cooperative and regional planning budget. For the cooperative and regional planning, what that really does is it facilitates cooperation between the members, which includes regional planning discussions. So if it's not specific to another fund, it generally falls within cooperative and regional planning. It's kind of your catch up. For 2025, our expenses are stable. We haven't increased those at all. But because we had additional RSSF funding available, we were able to decrease what the member contributions are required. So you're going to see a decrease in member contributions. So going on to the next page, you'll see the detail. Now, when I'm looking at the budgets, I like to start with expenses, as that's really what drives the budget. So if you jump halfway down the page, you'll see we've included 50,000 for regional planning for administration. And then we have the allocation from corporate services of 327,000 here and here. Giving total expenses of 377,000 for the year. That's up about 5,700 from the previous year, solely being driven by the allocation to corporate service increase. How are we going to pay for that? Well, we have a second previous year surplus coming in of 22,000. We have the regional services support funding, which we didn't have in the previous year, of 188,000, meaning the amount that we need to collect from the members is 166,000 or 177,000 less than what we had to charge in the previous year. So because we have this additional funding, we're able to charge the membership less. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions on cooperative and regional. So the next budget is tourism promotion. And what's driving that for 2025? Obviously, we have the contract with the city. Each year that gets adjusted by a CPI adjustment. So that is factored in. As well, when we were discussing with the committees what they'd like to see in their budgets, they requested to have 15,000 to use for a specific project, and we'll get into the details of that on the next page. So that is included in there. We've applied RSSF funding for 50% of the total cost in tourism promotion. So that has again resulted in a decrease in the member contributions that are required for 2025. So what you're seeing here is the professional services would be our contract with the city, plus the 15,000 that would be used to analyze data related to the benefits and impact of tourism-related industry development in the region, for a total of 1,543,000. We have our allocations from corporate services of 130,000. That's up from the previous year. For a total budget of 1,674,000 for tourism promotion. We now have second previous year surpluses because 2023 was our first year we were operational with these funds. So we have some small surplus of 8,200 coming in 2025's budget. We have regional service support funding of 837,000 that we've applied for and been approved for, which means the amount that we would have to charge the members is 828,000 or 237,000 less than what was charged in 2020. Any questions for tourism promotion?
Just a question on, or question on, the 15,000 for analysis of data, and I admit I was one of the ones in the finance committee that raised this. Is this not redundant with the services that we're already paying for with the service providers? I would assume that if you have somebody providing that service, that they can give you results that show the benefits. And I guess that's why I raised it. It seems redundant.
Madam Chair, through you to the members. Director Fox, this was discussed before. Within this, the contracts are kind of finite in what they do. Fredericton Capital Region Tourism, in all fairness, are trying to do what they call geofencing to try to get more granular data for the communities of what they do. There had been a fair bit of discussion at the Economic Expansion Committee at different points about trying to get a deeper dive into data for each community so that you understand what that benefit is in the community. This is an opportunity to put 15,000 into that budget fund. If we, in terms of that, if we want to continue to go down that road, to work that, and that will help us create a better dashboard on reportables back to the board overall, which is certainly an objective of the Economic Expansion Committee. So what we're looking at is, yes, the service provider is trying to provide the best data. But in the agreements, there were certain, there's only a finite amount of money to be able to do those things. This would be an opportunity to take a little different look from what the board or the committee in this particular case would like to do. And we can also utilize that funding to get another 15,000 on a 50-50 cost share from the province to be able to use that and actually get that data. So whether it be on a trail usage, or whether it be on our visitations, or whatever that may be that we want to focus on. And we know there's all kinds of different aspects to that people want to look at. And so there was a number of things that came up at the committee, but that was really what it was for in terms of that. And I think that would help all communities. I think several have been asking for it.
Still not solid.
So you can look at the economic development budget. It's very similar to tourism promotions budget in that we have a service provider, this time we Ignite. So that contract, the increase reflects the PI investment there. And as well, the committee did request to have a small amount included to be used for a project at their discretion. And we can discuss that on the next page. So I'll go into the details there. So for expenses, in this professional services budget of $2,263,000, it includes the amount for the working entity agreement, which you'll see that $774,000 exactly is funding for Pedal. So that's our agreement with Ignite as well, the additional work that they're doing. So that's included in there, the original MOU plus the CPI adjustment, plus the $15,000, which is to formulate a plan emanating out of Vision 2030 for the Agricultural Alliance and the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fisheries. In that 5 times. So that's included there. And then we have our allocation from corporate services of $130,000 for a total budget of $2,393,000. How are we going to pay for it? Again, we have a small amount of second previous year surplus coming in of $7,200. We have the pedal funding, as I already talked about, which matches the expenses exactly of $774,000. RSSF is up slightly from the previous year to $809,000, leaving $802,498 is what we would have to charge for members for economic development, which is an increase of $33,000 from the previous year's budget. Any questions on economic development?
Yes. Same thing applies here. Thank you, the service provider, and they should be able to adapt to provide us with better data for the board and professional services. So just a comment.
Yes.
Through you, Madam Chair, Director Fox understood, but what we're looking at here through economic expansion is a presentation from the Agricultural Alliance, presentation from Agriculture, Aquaculture, Fisheries, and we have Vision 2030 coming out of that. I contacted the consultant, David Campbell, who everybody believe has met around the table. He's working on the 2030, and this is a very modest budget to look at. What do those next steps? We're going to get all this combination of information, and don't forget through the contract with Ignite, they are paying for the Vision 2030 for the region, and or you are through them, and that's all part of that. But yet, what we're looking at is how do we develop those next steps in terms of that. So within that. So that was in that framework of funding to do the 2030, and the other two were pieces that the province has undertaken and the provincial department. It was so popular at the Economic Expansion Committee meeting that the parties were actually asked to come back and present further, because some of those that were involved in the agricultural industry explained that to utilize a lot of these programs, you have to have funding up front. And that's a challenge for those in the industry. And how can we look at possible ways to change that and plan for better agricultural use in the region? Because we don't want to see that land disappear and get fully developed. There is going to be development, but we have to do it responsibly. So.
Wouldn't the funds that they're paying them Ignite to do all this, isn't that part and parcel?
And there's only oh, sorry. They're not in chair. Through you, Director Forsyth, there's a finite amount of money there that they do. And there's initiatives each year in their business plan that they bring in. And that we provide that, and we adopted it. We were the ones who approved their business plan, and they come in and present it, and they do those. And that's what we try to do, is work within that envelope. This would be those next steps for the implementation of all communities and everybody included in that. And to what are those next steps to actually looking at that information that comes in, and how do we best utilize that, and how do we best put it into practice, whether it be protecting the land through land planning, use and development, whether it be better funding opportunities and mechanisms, whether it be better, whatever that may look like, to develop those plans moving forward. I'm not trying to sell you on it. What I'm trying to do is inform you on it, because this actually
not selling.
no, but with all due respect, Director Forsyth, that came from members of the committee saying this is an important area. And then when we cast out the note, we had, I think, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had 21 or 22 people at that last forum on agricultural development. And those were members from your communities all throughout the region. So.
Okay, Director Rogers.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just, I would also tend to agree that to me, we're going through the Vision 2020 exercise with Ignite. It just seems like we're being a bit, it's like the cart before the horse, like if to be investing in certain sectors prior to, I appreciate it came out of the economic development expansion, but it just seems to be doing that before we get the Vision 2030. I'm just wondering if the timing of the expenditure, and if that lines up, it doesn't line up fully to me. I would expect Ignite, the work that they're doing right now that we're paying for is very much the Vision 2030, and for them to be advising us that additional piece of work. I just question the timing. So,
Madam Chair, through you to Director Rogers. In doing that, I reached out to David Campbell, asked him what that next part would look like. And that's where that developed from. I said agriculture seems to be coming up quite a bit at economic expansion, whether it be the protection of the land, food security, food insecurity, all those things related to agricultural lands. And I consulted with him just at a high level briefly. What would that look like moving forward? What would we need to put away to get started from a regional perspective on those next steps process? And that's where that recommendation came from.
even though that may not be the kind of 2030, that's something that the region.
Agriculture will be in there. Agriculture is certainly a key part of that.
Okay, Director
So
Paul.
I too, that there's not gonna be, I mean, knowledge economy stuff will be too.
Oh,
That,
yeah.
I mean, that's my point. I think that the 2030, that Vision 2030 is going to advise that we focus as a region in different areas. And so it just seems to me to be a bit presumptive to pick certain ones and fund those and include it in this funding. I think that Ignite should do their work. Look, it feels like we're doing their work for them and saying, you're doing this planning, but we've already decided that these things are important and we're gonna put money behind it. To me, the value of that planning is for them to then come back to us and instruct our work. So it's, again, it's a timing issue. I'm not arguing that it's actually a really important economy to be looking at, but.
Madam Chair, if I may, through you to Director Rogers. When we consulted the committee, that was one of the things that came out of the conversation as being of primary importance in the region.
But the committee just advises the board. I mean, I question the committee's determination to do that prior to receiving the Vision 2030 plan. It just, I think, I question that timing. I appreciate the interest. I think it's valuable work. I don't think the timing is right. So as a board member, I'm questioning the work of the standard on that, on the timing of that, not the value of it.
Okay, Director Fox.
Yeah, so I'll be quite frank. Now, I'm gonna ask this question and then I'm gonna make a statement right after and then you can answer the question. Are we to understand and believe that we have a service provider that we're paying $2.2 million a year to and we can't change their work plan? So because that's what I'm seeing and hearing and what you're saying. And if we're paying $2.2 million to Ignite and we don't have any say over the work plan and what we want to see them do, we better revisit the contract.
And through you to Director Fox. We approved their work plan. I'm sure they bring it in and we approve it. They present it to us, to the board, and the board approves it. And that's what they base their work plans off of, and their all their key performance indicators and everything else are coalesced around what does the board, what did the board approve? So they bring that into us and we approve that. And that's been approved, that goes through the committee to the board and then into their work structure. Certainly, we could look at changing that. This was just when we were looking at developing the budget, we asked the board, each committee, what is it that you feel is important to bring forward within this? And some of the directors around the table and others on the committee levels said these are the things that are important. There's be no different than under tourism with our economic expansion. One of the things that come out or under infrastructure service, trail development and things like that, and connectivity within the region. And we look at those things and how we do them, and then we implement that with a modest budget into the budget.
So I'll follow up with, have we approved our work plan for 2025? Because we're talking about 2025 budget here.
Mm-hmm.
Have we approved our work plan for 2025?
No, they'll come into us for their 2025 work plan
Before
proceeding in terms of that.
before finishing our budget?
I'll have to check the terms of the agreement.
Well,
It's usually in the fall or first in the new year.
my thought is that if we're gonna do this, we should do it before we approve our budget. We can't approve a budget, then approve a work plan after the fact. It seems kind of silly. To me, so.
I agree.
Okay, just one at a time, please. Director Fox said before. You finished now? Okay, Director DePussy, please.
Director Sweeney and myself were put on the Ignite board by this board here a year ago or more. And at the last board meeting, we've already asked Ignite to refine their data, which is going to take more work for them to do because it was general. It was to the Service Commission, their activities. We asked for that to be in each municipality, the results moving ahead. And it is going to cause more work. They basically agreed to do that. I don't know what'll be in their work plan going ahead, but that's one step that they have offered to take, even on their old contract, to do extra work so that each municipality knows what's happening rather than just general to the Service Commission, which we found at the board level at Ignite wasn't much good to each municipality, just being on the Service Commission. We want to know what's happening in each municipality. And we also asked that when they go into a municipality, in the past, the municipality didn't know when they were there, how often they were there, or whatever. And we've asked for them to at least contact the municipality when they're going in to see a business or individual or whatever. We don't need to know that business or individual, but it's that they're going in and there's activity there. And I think Dave can back me up on these thoughts that come out of that board meeting. So I think Ignite's willing to help us and go ahead. And I'm sure they will with the agriculture sector, there's no doubt about that. I don't think it's the 15,000 that's bothering them. I mean, yes, it takes a little extra money, but I think they're going to do the work that we need done, and they come with their contracts. That's my mindset of that.
Thank you. I'm just gonna ask, Director Pleadwell or Director Nicklin, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, is this $15,000? Is this money that will be matched by the government as well? And that we would only use this money if it was based on a needed basis, would it not? Because I'm just asking that. That's the way I understood it, and so that it would just show up as a surplus at the end of the year if we did not use it.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all the question I had.
Thank you. Director Pleadwell?
His volume's not working.
Okay, Director Pleadwell,
Is that
do you
working?
have any comments?
Oh, there you go.
There, okay.
No, it's not.
Wrong mic. I have too many mics. The only thing I would say is I can attest to the importance of the agricultural file to my community. We had a very healthy turnout a number of times this year in the area supported by these initiatives, and I have a great deal of support for it. I do understand the concern with respect to work plans versus budgets. Some of these nuances we certainly need to work through of what makes logistical sense because they are under contract with us. I think, but there's a bit of a dance to play to get the right cadence now that we're, a couple of years into after reform.
Thank you. Don't think, no more comments. You can carry on, please.
Okay, so that brings us to community development, and I'm gonna ask Sean to provide an overview of this.
Thank you. So the community development section of the budget includes a line that's called public relations. I want to start off with a little comment around that. We do our very best to line up our budget lines with the provincial form. And so in our budget, you'll see the increase this year is primarily in the area of public relations. And it's not really public relations, it's initiatives, separate initiatives that we're going to take on. Changes in the budget include the addition of an employee that was previously on contract and 8 initiatives that we've discussed with the committee for a cost of just under $40,000. And there's a detailed information sheet in the consent agenda that you adopted for each of those. So that's, I guess, the introduction and overview.
Don? So for the expenses, as Don's highlighted, for salaries and benefits, we have a budget for 2025 of $190,000. That's a $95,000 increase from the previous year. That includes one additional employee, which will help with the new social mandates that have been rolled out. The public relations budget of $40,000 Don talked about relates to the 8 initiatives. The professional services budget of $75,000 is costs associated with the poverty, homelessness, and mental health focused on social infrastructure planning. And then for the administration costs, I'll call them travel, office, printing, and telecommunications. We've increased those slightly because of the additional employee as well as the additional work that's happening with the social mandates. So total with the allocations and corporate services of $180,000, total community development expenses, the budget for 2025 is $511,000. If we jump up to the revenue, we can see we have a second previous year surplus of $39,000. We have an ESIC grant, which funds operational costs of $17,000. RSSF will fund 50% of our total costs for $255,000. leaving $199,473 to be charged out to the members, or just under $32,000 increase from previous year's budget.
Dr. Rogers?
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, the new employee doing this work, have we assessed exactly what it is that they'll be working on? There's so much redundancy in this sector amongst nonprofit organizations. I mean, we saw it ourselves in the committee work. The overlap of all of these organizations that are out there that are doing almost the same things in our regions, yet nobody really knows what they're doing. Like there's quite a bit of confusion in this ecosystem, I would say. And I'm just wondering if it's been rationalized, what work this person is going to be taking on in addition to the coordinator person that we already have in place. So I don't know who responds to that, if it's a Don or John.
Madam Chair, there is no overlap between the economic coordinator and this position. Economic coordinator is fully invested in the Economic Expansion Committee and primarily on other initiatives that the Chief Executive Officer is involved in. This individual has been active under the contract, is working a full day in delivering our services that we presently deliver, and we'll be carrying a significant load of the additional initiatives that we take on next year.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm confused, obviously. I wasn't speaking about the economic development. Suzanne doesn't currently serve as the economic development person. She's the community development person, right? So this is an additional person to that.
Yes.
That's what I'm referring to. So I just don't have an understanding of what that person is doing versus, and I don't want to, versus what Suzanne is currently doing. I don't, unless a lot has changed. I haven't attended recent community development meetings. So unless a lot has changed in that work, I don't have an understanding of what that person is going to be doing. To be honest, we're not delivering anything. We're not.
Yes, Madam Chair, certainly. We are more active. This individual is not doing what Suzanne does. She is the primary interface with resiliency, the resiliency committee, and other initiatives that she is carrying on her own. So it's not an overlap with Suzanne.
I just feel with this work, we haven't sunk our teeth into this work enough to rationalize having an additional position in my mind in this work. I can't wait for us to, and and I know that we're moving in that direction, but I don't think that we're there at the stage that we can get a second person working in that. Yeah.
Madam Chair, if you want, also, Director Rogers, the individual is working primarily in the development of the relationship, and she has a background in Indigenous affairs, and is working with us in building that through the CRSC. We do know that it was great. Director Morrison and I attended meetings at the Village First Nation last year, and were able to help assist. And there's been great work done by our group at Capital Region Tourism to reach out. I noticed that they're now advertising their powwow, their upcoming powwow on Fredericton Tourism. There's some other on the paddling network. It looks like there'll be incorporation within there at some point. And there's also other work this individual will be undertaking that now that we're getting into the social mandate, to be able to help and assist and coordinate within that so that there is no overlap and duplication within the services. Because as you know, and as you said, there's all kinds of groups in here. One of the first things Don and I asked about on community development was how many people are in this space in the region. And again, there's 346 or 300 and almost 50 different groups in the region working in different things. This person's to bring a lot of that work together, work with other regional service commissions as well to understand where they are in the social mandate, how we can learn from their experience, especially the Southeast. You've already been in contact with them. Should be interfacing with the Department of Social Development and with environment and local government. and will become a person that really well vested in that. And we'll be working with your community as well to ensure, as we said on community development before, and when we were given the presentation at the July 26th forum, the intent is not to have any duplication or overlap of the work that's being happening in the city of Fredericton. But there's a whole pile of work that needs to happen and get out into the other communities around the center. So we need to have that capacity. And if we don't have that capacity, we're going to struggle greatly within that mandate.
Madam Chair, I was thinking that the work that Suzanne was doing, I thought that was really.
She's doing a lot of the work with on the ground with the organizations. This person will be doing that other level, bringing in that social mandate to ensure that there's no duplication or overlap within that, and being that interface between the two.
So I would just say, I'm now beginning to comment on things, but through you, Madam Chair, I would just say, I don't think she should be doing the work with the organization. Like, I think that is something we need to be really careful of as a service commission, is that those organizations are doing the work. She doesn't need to be on the ground doing the work. Her work is a coordination of it from a regional perspective. It feels premature to me that we're hiring, even as you explain it to me, it's sort of what they will, the work isn't there yet, so I just question it.
Okay, so we will move on, please.
Right, the next budget we'll look at is regional transportation. Brett's gonna give you an overview of that.
Only 2 points, but it's still worth setting up for it. Everybody said that. Major changes for this year's budget are the costs now reflect the services that are kind of started by the renewal rise. And we also paid an acceptance to CRSC now. Fairly straightforward.
So we'll carry on.
So for this budget, for the expenses, the professional services of 86,000, that represents the actual cost of the rural ride contract. And then they also charge HST. There's a portion of HST that we don't receive a rebate for. That's at 3600. The allocation from corporate services is just under 110 for a total cost for regional transportation of 199,000. On the revenue side, we have second previous year surplus of 24,000. We have our E6 grant of 50,000. RSSF will fund 50% for 99,000, leaving the amount that will be charged out to the members of $25,017, or just under a $31,000 decrease from the previous.
Does anyone have any questions?
Regional services support fund.
Director Rochester.
Through you, Madam Chair, so regional transportation, I know that community development captured regional transportation. Did it not under its mandate? Has that changed? Is there a reason why that's not included for the community development budget?
Madam Chair, if I might respond to that, regional transportation is administered through the Community Development Committee. It does, however, have its own budget. Madam Chair, the reason for that is that provincial government has specified that it is a separate fund. And so we must produce a budget for it. It must be balanced on its own. One of those things that we mentioned, not only do we not get to name things the way that we would like, we also are told what our funds will be.
Okay, carry on, please.
Next comes public safety. Bring it over to that again.
Thanks. Again, pretty straightforward. The committee requested that we establish a professional services fund. It's quite like that was incorporated into the 2025 budget, and same as with transportation, we account for the increased RSS.
So for the expenses for the public safety, We have 2,500 for printing and copying. That's the same as the previous year. And then the 5,000 that Brett talked about, which would be used for information awareness and review of emergency response classifications. Our allocation from corporate services is 104,000 for a total budget of 112,000. On the revenue side, we have a small second previous year surplus of 1,700. Regional services support funding for RSSF of 56,000. Leaving the member charges of 54,482 for an increase of 6748 of the 2024 budget.
Wait, carry on, please.
Okay, the next budget is sport, recreation, and cultural infrastructure, and John's going to provide an overview for that.
So I'll try to be as brief as Brett. So we had increased professional services budget to 60,000, and we've had increased RSSF funding, region service support funding. The 60,000 is from lessons learned in the last year in terms of looking at our whether it had been the community asset inventory that we had undertaken, whether it's been the work under the proposed regional aquatic center, all of those things that we had in each of those areas, cost funding to do it in terms of that, if you want professionals to do that work. So we were trying to look at it from a modest point of view. Last year, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mary Kay, we didn't really have a huge budget for it last year in terms of that, in terms of the professional services. And we were able to get some transition funding through that to help offset that cost. And so now we're using our RSSF to offset that cost as well.
So looking at the numbers here, as John talked about, we have 60,000 established for continuation of our asset mapping and trail connection project. We have allocation from corporate services of 125,000 for a total budget of 185,000. Second previous year surplus coming in is just under 20,000. RSSF funding is 92,000, meaning the amount that has to be charged to the members would be 72,725, or a $3,500 decrease from the previous year. All right. Next up is Lonnie, the plan and development.
Our budget is only supported by those that are receiving our services, so Fredericton, Montco, and Maryland, themselves not receiving services. 77% of our expenditures are the salaries and benefits. Additional employees are required to meet the new legislative requirements for municipal plan components, as well as increased demand for bylaw enforcement and development services. A big part of our budget reflects additional costs for new rental space, and we are using RSF to pay for some of these new costs in 2025.
So this is a summary of what that means for your individual communities. So costs are allocated for planning and development based on the member's share of the tax base. So you can see in 2024 what each participating community contributed for a total of 1.9 million. In 2025, you'll see what that means for a total of 2,095,000. So overall, an increase of 173,771. But the good news is, as Director Corey mentioned, it's actually a decrease on your tax base. So in 2024, it represented 3.62 cents. In 2025, it's actually 3.57. So because tax base has grown, your shares have truly gone. We go to the next page. I'm going to start with revenue for this one because it is multiple pages and that way we're not jumping around. So as we talked about from the previous slide, the contribution from participating members that's required is $2,095,000 or $173,000 increase. Our other revenue remains the same. That's blue plate sales of $7,000. We have applied for and been approved for regional services support funding of $156,500. That is to cover costs associated with the new rental space, as well as the additional employees that are required in order to do the job that's set out in legislation. And then the second previous year surplus that's coming into this budget is 170,000, which is increase of 58,000 from the previous year. So for the expenses, you can see total expenses for 2025, we budgeted 568,000. That's up 65,000 from the previous year's budget. The main drivers there would obviously be the rental cost. That's $39,500 increase for the new rental space. Office expenses we've increased accordingly because we will be in a bigger space, and salaries and benefits have been increased by the CPI adjustments. For building inspection services, we have a total budget of 582,000. That's up just about under 75,000 from the previous year, and you can see that that's being driven by the increase in salaries and benefits. So that's an additional part-time by law enforcement officers, as well as CPI adjustments for our current level of staff. And then just adjusting some of those other administration costs to reflect what we're actually seeing being spent in those areas. For our planning and development expenses, we have a budget of $1,040,000, which is up 295,000 from the previous year. And that reflects 3 additional positions. So we have a development officer, a contract planning director, and a GIS mapping coordinator. So that's what's included in there. And then the professional development and travel have been increased to allow travel to officer development officer. Our planning advisory services have decreased by 7,400 to 22,000. And that reflects the decrease in the members that are going to be on the class. Our allocation from corporate services has also decreased for 2025 at 151,000, leaving a total budget of 2,365,000. All right, the next budget is the solid waste budget, and Brett's going to provide it.
Gonna be quite long, it's relatively on this one. That's the 4 goals. Major change this year, we've increased projected tonnage up to 86,000. From 84,500, that's to better reflect actuals. We've also got major changes in recycling going on in the 2025 budget, and I hope to be able to bring that some of the details to the board in the closed session. On top of that, we've got a large previous second previous year surplus, about $1 million or so. And as a result of all those things, we're proposing no tipping fee.
Got one fan anyway, Brett.
Okay, so we'll start again with revenue. You're on the previous slide. We gotta jump ahead. We're going backwards. There we go. Sorry. No worries. Perfect. Okay, so starting with solid waste revenue, as Brett talked about, we did increase our projected tonnage from 84,500 to 86,000 tons. So the total budget for regular garbage is $8,944,000 or $156,000 increase. For C and D, we've increased the tonnage from 5,500 to 6,000 tons for a total budget of 255,000. The increase in recycling reflects the change to operations, which you're all aware of. The other revenue has decreased by 195,000. There's 2 factors that are going on there. The first is we are no longer receiving ash from UNB. And the second one is we always include our disposal, the revenue we get from the disposal of our pieces of equipment that we are purchasing during the year. So in 2024, we disposed of 3 pieces of equipment and replaced them. In 2025, we're only disposing of 1 piece of equipment. So we've reduced the amount of revenue we can expect there. Second previous year surplus is Brett hit on, that's really what's driving this budget, because it was, so high in 2023. We're able to, use that in 2025's budget and not have to increase the tipping fee accordingly. But it's something that doesn't continue every year if you don't have those surpluses, so something that we've got to keep an eye on for 2026 and going forward. And we did not require any reserve fund transfers, so there's no, amount in there. So the total budget for solid waste is $11,535,000. So looking at the expenses on the next page, you'll see for salaries and benefits, we have a budget of $4,026,000. That's up just under $209,000 from the previous year. It reflects CPI adjustment for all of our staff, plus 2 additional laborers that are included in there. On the maintenance costs, we have a total budget of $1,513,000. You can see most of these lines have been adjusted. And it's really to reflect actuals of what we're seeing. The LGM, that stands for landfill gas management. And so we included an amount for pipe extension project, which will help with landfill gas capture, which will help with odors, as well as our power production. So that is a one-time cost that we have included in there. It's increased by $309,000 in the 2025 budget. You'll see water treatment, we had a decrease because there was a one-time cost for a curtain repair in 2024. So the budget's come down accordingly there. And household hazardous waste has been increased to reflect the current volume and pricing that we are seeing. For the equipment cost budget, total for 2025 is $1,284,000. That's down $41,000 from the previous year. And the decrease is due to decrease in fuel costs. The diesel for the piece of equipment. So you can imagine we spend a significant amount on diesel every year, and decreases in those prices are always really expressed. On the next page, we have a budget of $741,000 for baler costs. That's increased for $25,000 related to the price of wire that we purchased, as well as a one-time cost, the increase of $125,000 for the baler building. That's to replace the carton baler at the garbage baling facility. Waste diversion, also known as recycling, has decreased significantly because of the change in the operations and how that is going to be going forward. So we previously had a budget of $491,000. Costs have been reduced significantly to $166,000. And so on fuel and maintenance, those only include costs related to the Recycle at Work program. No longer do we have other in there. For administration expenses for the budget for 2025, we have a total of $1,278,000. That's up $169,000 from the previous year. And so most of those have to do with what we're actually seeing. So you'll see professional fees are up $75,000. That relates to our engineering services that we contract. We've increased advertising and promotion by $40,000. And we've also had our increase to our office expenses of $26,500, which is janitorial services that we've contracted out. Debt servicing is up $327,000 from the previous year for a total of $1,121,000. That relates in 2024, we purchased 3 pieces of equipment and a significant cost higher than we probably would. So that reflects the payment of principal and interest going forward in 2025. Post-closing costs are relatively consistent at $11,000 for the budget for 2025. Capital expenditures. So we have no cell that's going to be developed in 2025. We have some cost savings there. Capital expenditures of $235,000. That includes paving on the site, which we try to keep up with every year, as well as a forklift purchase, and we'll see that on the next slide. So transfers to reserves. Because we have our large second previous year surplus, we've included a transfer to reserves of $600. Go back. There you go. Yeah. So because we have our large second previous year surplus, what we've chosen to do with that is put it away into a capital reserve fund. To be used at the discretion of the board. It can only be taken out by motion of the board but it can be used for capital purchases in the future. We are in the early stages of looking at reserve fund policy and updating that. Indications are we're probably underfunded with our reserve fund. So we're gonna get a head start on getting that funded to where it needs to be because we have the funds available to us in 2021. So we're gonna make use of that. Our allocation for corporate services is $482,000 or a $40,000 increase, giving a total budget of $11,535. Any questions on that one?
I know we're not increasing the 15 fees. The question is, next year, which you mentioned, they need to be increased. Wouldn't be somewhere to have a small increase this year? So we don't have to pay a big increase next year. So that it offsets, that's just, to me, it's budgeting.
I love that week because that's how I manage the budget, being right. So we always, when I bring a budget forward, we always look at future years and what it means. So there's a couple of reasons why I feel confident in not recommending it. If all things held consistent and we didn't have any second previous year surplus coming into next year's budget, we're looking at about a $4 increase. But we are having a very successful year at the solid waste. We do expect to have a healthy surplus, so we will be able to bring that in. So I don't expect you're going to need a significant increase in 2026 at this point, based on the information.
It's the same thing as you increase your taxes a little bit so that you don't have to put up 5 cents. And you put about 25 cents or 50 cents a year, that adds up to 2% in 4 years, and nobody knows the difference because it's so small.
I agree with your philosophy.
I know.
Okay,
I'm a financial
Director
advisor.
Faulkner,
Could what's transferred to the reserves, if there is a deficit next year, could that not be used for that?
It could be used for capital projects. So the cell costs are considered capital projects. So when we build a cell in 2026, we could take money out of a reserve fund to pay for that.
Rather than.
So yes, and that's how we smooth the tipping fees by funding reserves out of it.
any further questions?
All right, so
Yes, sorry, yes.
So the next. This is just a summary of the capital projects which are unique to solid waste because most of the other services that we provide, we don't have significant capital costs. So included in this budget that will be paid from operations, I've already highlighted it, is $110,000 for paving and $125,000 for forklift. And then we are due to replace a loader to the cost of $410,000. That's a significant piece of equipment. Those are costs that we typically go and borrow through the Municipal Capital Finance Corporation. So that's part of the budget approval as well. And it's required disclosure that the board is aware that the impact of borrowing is $410,000, would cost about $2,200 in 2025, and then $98,700 for the next 5 years. That equates to about $1.15 on the tipping fee. But each year we also do retire some debentures as well. So we just see a decrease, an increase, and we try to smooth that out to manage. And then the last budget we have to look at is generation facility.
And on a high note, this is a pretty good news story. We've seen record outputs in the past year at our power generation facility, and we expect that's going to continue. So we've made adjustments there. Obviously, we've got to produce a balanced budget, and any surplus that we do generate is going to be transferred into a reserve fund, similar to what we just talked about in the other solid waste budget. In this case, the budgeted reserve fund transfer for 2025 is $692,000. And typically what we use those reserve funds for are to replace the engines when they reach their 20,000 hour lifespan. Right. And so we've just gone through that process. We're rebuilding the fund so we don't have to borrow more money. Have to replace the engines in 8 years time.
So for power generation, we have budgeted generation revenue of 1.5 million. That's up 400,000 from the previous year, and that's due to increased kilowatt production. We have a second previous year surplus coming into the 2025 budget of 318,000. On the expense side of things, our maintenance and repairs budget has increased 200,000. The reason for that is in 2025, we'll reach the 20,000 hourly maintenance interval on our engines, which is a significant amount of repairs that are required to the engines. So you have to increase your budget accordingly. There's some downtime that's associated with that as well. Our operational expenses, we've budgeted 198,000. That's up slightly, 6,500 for CPI adjustment for staff. On the administration side, we have a budget of 60,500. That's consistent with the previous year's budget. Our debt servicing, the budget is down to 311,000. We now have paid off the original debenture that was paid off in 2023. So we have 2 debentures on the engine refits that we are currently paying off. We have our allocation from corporate services of 105, just under 105,000. And then the actual surplus that we expect power generation to produce in 2025 is the 692,000. But again, because we have to a zero line, we say we're going to put that into a reserve fund. The board gets to decide at the end of 2025 exactly how much you want to put away, and we'll make recommendations at that point. So included in your board package was this one pager with regard to the budget. This is a great document if you want to just be able to see exactly what is going on with the budget and not refer to 15 different pages. So it highlights.
Is there an each number on there, or was that?
And it's right at the beginning.
Right, the first one?
I won't go through it because.
Right after the report, it was on the back side of the report, you can still put it on the next page.
Yeah.
Very small. I hope you can read it, but it's a one pager. It gives you all the information that I presented tonight, but in a one page.
I have no problem with the three-page increase of the.
I can make it bigger. Easier for you to read. I don't mind doing that.
I'll find it.
Any questions?
That's fine.
Yes.
On the backside, we're talking now, I don't want anybody to misunderstand, like, talking about $50,000 and $50,000 here, and a position there. I don't want anybody to misunderstand that it's, like, it's probably not gonna break us, it's not gonna kill us, but I look at this as every one of us is on this table as a shareholder. And we're making an investment in this. I want to make sure that our investment's gonna give us a return. I like to keep developing, and that's because I come from third from the smallest community in this room. We don't have a big tax base to work with. We budget tight, and so that's the way I think about these things. And if we've got service providers that are supposed to be providing a service, most of the need of us increasing budgets to duplicate or be redundant. I just don't see it. Additional staff. You know, there's additional staff, and I know from firsthand experience that the planning division needs some extra staff. They're running, and I have no problem with that. You know, governance officer, nobody has been able to explain that to me yet, where I firmly believe we need it. So that's where I'm coming from on, and I'm questioning what may seem to some as small amounts. Another question I have, and I'd like to propose this, I guess, if need be, I'd make a motion. How does our Capital Region Service Commission budget as a percentage of, or you know, our budget is this much per $100 of tax base. So, whatever our total tax base is for the capital region, you want to be.
You have that on
You're the number. But what is our total budget? Per $100 of tax base for the whole region? And how do we stack up against the like similar sized municipality or regions? Human service commission? How do we stack up against Southeast? How do we stack up against funding? Because those are the two ones, those are the two that would be more similar to our size in terms of tax base, population. I think it would be pointless to compare against some of the smaller regional service commissions because things are gonna be out of whack there, and I know that. But how do we stack up against those? Are we putting together a flat inflated budget here? Or are we putting gold plated, or are we somewhere in the silver bronze with it? I'd like to know what that is, what that number is.
It's a good idea.
So,
It's an easy thing to come up with.
no, questions gotta come through me, please. Do you want to answer that?
Well, I'll ask Mary Kay to chime in on the first part as well, there in terms of that overall. I do know, through you, Madam Chair, to the members, in comparison to Southeast, in some areas, they're much more developed than we are. On the social mandate, for example, they were out of the gate first, and they, not only that, but they partnered because they had a crisis that led it. And they were able to do that. They staffed up on their community development side. Their regional transportation is looking much different than ours. So, in a lot of ways, we're comparing apples and oranges, but we can find a percentage base if that's what you're looking for. And I can call my colleagues and we can look at that. The challenge is that the RSC in St. John or in funding is much different than the RSC of the capital region. The RSC in Southeast has a much different focus than the RSC of the capital region. In terms of that, they're going to maybe I don't want to say anything out of tune, but they have a major infrastructure piece that they're going to be investing in and that they're trying to undertake and develop in terms of that. So when we look at it, it may be out of skew based on the interest of each RSC. That's the challenge. We got to look at their plan versus our plan versus tax base versus population, and then boil all that down into.
That's fine. That's what I like to see is what is the number? And I realize that they're gonna have different focus on certain things, and maybe they're doing things differently than we are. Maybe that's the model we should be looking at. If it's costing the taxpayer in the region, that's money. Accomplishing, they're succeeding in meeting the requirements of government, service delivery. Maybe we ought to be looking at a different service delivery model. That's all I'm saying. Is it gives us a metric to measure by if we're 50 cents per hundred. I don't know what the number is. 20 cents of 100 of tax base, and somebody else is 15. And why is it 15 versus what our cost is? And that's all I'm saying is it would be handy for us as a board to assess where we're at and things that are nice to have, additional staff and money for this project, money for that project. When you're trying to tighten your belt, some of those things you better prioritize, and that's the way that you look at budgeting when you're in a small little macro rural community. Because we can't afford to do this. And I'd like for that notion to come to this table too.
Mary Kay, if you could respond to Director Fox's first part there.
Yes, so that is an easy calculation that we can come up with, so I'm happy to do that.
Madam Chair, I don't think there's another question before that.
You go ahead, John.
Oh, no, go
Excuse me, I'm the chair, and I'll say who's gonna go first. You were gonna talk, and then we will go to Director Rogers. Thank you.
So in terms of staff and in terms of budget, we come in and we present a budget. We're very transparent because we wanted that. That is who we are as a staff. That is who we are as an organization. Everybody in here has a lot of professional integrity. Most of the people, as I've said many times in this organization, they work far more than one job in here. Sometimes 4 and 5 different things where they're cross-trained, able to pitch in, help. We were looking at, Director Rogers, you had mentioned, and so did Director Fox, about a governance officer. We had times this summer where we can't give people a vacation because we don't have the people to do the work that we need to do. And that's mandated through that because we're trying to do what we can do to serve the commission in the best way possible. Looking at this budget, what we're really truly looking and asking for you is saying, look, we're being completely transparent in how we develop this budget and what we need to make things better. When somebody comes into the organization, they don't just work in one area. They're often working, you'll see them in multiple different facility capacities. And why? Because we don't have a big staff. We're not sitting here building a utopia or building a kingdom. What we're really trying to do is, I'm like any one of you, I don't want to pay more taxes. I look down the street from Director Morrison and I know he doesn't like taxes and no more than the next person. And we want to do that properly. But the role of the board is to provide the budget, and the role of the CEO is to provide the framework for the staff. And the reason we put in what we're doing is, again, transparency, honesty, and professional integrity. And that's what your team here at this table, in this room, and in this building, down at the landfill, that's what you get every single day. I always say, pound for pound, we are doing better and more with less than any of the other RSCs. Other RSCs, they don't have planning and development services that they offer in the rural regions. Those are handled differently. And then, such as in funding, we have a different frame than Southeast. When we're comparing, we have to know exactly what that frame is that we're comparing. We'll do a comparison, Director Fox, and break that down. But what we have to be cognizant of is that if we don't have the tools and the resources, that's when we have to start saying no. And when we start saying no, I hope that people understand. We're looking at a contract position and formalizing one position to a full-time. And because why? Because we know in 2025, I met with the Department of Social Development, as I said earlier, just before I went out on vacation. And there's lots of great work to be done, lots of great work to be coordinated. We talked about at the Community Development Committee, striking a committee, a CEO committee. Well, we'll bring the CAOs in to work on that committee to ensure we're not having any duplication in that area. And of course, we want those that are more advanced in those areas to be part of that table. And when we bring that in, then we have some resources to be able to do that. But if we don't have the resources, it's pretty hard to get started because we have one person working part-time on one area and one person working part-time on another area to go along with their other jobs. And if I look at Brett, we look at Brett, okay, solid waste division. It's a pretty big operation, as you can see by the numbers here tonight and the things that have to be done. Then you look at regional transportation. Also a fairly undertaking that, getting the tender that was put out or getting the RFP that was put out and looking at that and putting that out for the region. Many of the communities have reached out and said, we need regional transportation to get off the ground. We got to get going on this. And we're working with the groups. And I know Brett's met with the city staff and we've met with other staff around the region to get this put together. Then you look at Brett, on that with public safety as the senior lead supporting public safety with Kelly. God love Kelly, but she gets every meeting. Some hard to get a vacation day now and again. When you're at every meeting in this organization, people like to meet. And that's because you're hardworking, invested in the communities and in the region. And then on top of that, we're still going forward because we're contractually obligated to continue on and work with the steering committee and the working groups that were established to develop a proposal on an aquatic center. And we're still working through that. And I was away last week, selfishly moving my daughter to London, Ontario. Didn't want to see her go, by the way, but she did. Anyway, but she's up there. Brett's handling all that while I'm away. Sometimes he's away at meetings that are very valuable to the RSC, and I'm there doing that work. We're doing this together. Everybody's pitching in, everybody's doing more. Poor Lonnie, I pull into the drive or to the parking lot sometimes 7 o'clock in the morning, and Lonnie's car's not here. I get worried. I usually call, see if he's okay. I get worried if if I don't know that he's out on vacation. Same as with a lot of them in here. They come in early, they leave late, they never complain. What we're saying in this budget, we're looking for two things. A contract position for a year to see if we can alleviate problems and help one another out and be able to serve you better. And the other one, to bring on that big behemoth, and everybody knows it's going to be a lot of work, that coordination piece, working with a committee that will establish, bring all of this together, and a person to do that. And not only that, they're going to be, again, like I said, going to be working on the social mandate, working on the 8 pieces that were proposed in the that was adopted in the report tonight. Look at those beautiful spreadsheets that Suzanne and Lise had done up with Don's guidance for the community development piece. And Director Hayward chairs that committee now, and we have a lot of good, well-intentioned things. Everything in there, the who, what, why, how, and how much it'll cost are on those spreadsheets. All the budget was developed through the committees. And we did that. We did it in a transparent manner because we didn't want, last year was really year 0. We were trying to figure out, still where the washroom was, so to speak. Now we know, and now we know what we need. We're looking at 2 people. We were able to reduce the member contributions significantly through the great work of Mary Kay and her team. And that doesn't come without a lot of thought, a lot of effort, and a lot of work. We had pre-meetings with environment and local government to say, if we put this in, can you support us on that? Because we want to help out our members. And Mary Kay led that discussion. I was right there with her. We were going back and forth. And, sometimes I open wide and say things I shouldn't. And Mary Kay puts them back in a box for me. So, it helps me out there. But we were there as a team representing this organization, this board, doing all the pre-leg work and all of that. And it doesn't seem like much. It's a lot of lifting. On our economic development side, when I met with Petal, we did our first report on the workforce labor force expansion agreement. Compliant in several of the factors, exceeding in other factors, whether that be on newcomer settlement, retention, all of that, job creation, all of those things. And we have 2 very competent members on that board representing our interests that were through the board. So I just want to say, when we're talking about this, I understand the frugality. Look, my wife tells me I'm tighter than bark to a tree. But the reality is I employ that same principle here at the office as I do in my own home, because, it's important, and we instill that in our children, we instill it in our board, we instill it in our public, and we go out there. And that's a very important piece. We're not looking for a lot. We've done a lot to reduce the contributions on those mandated services, using the tools that are available to us and using the government to pay for some of those transition costs. And we're waiting on funding in terms of that to help us offset with our move, in terms of that. So it's not like we're sitting here letting moss grow under the feet. We're banging on the door saying, hey, we need your help, and our board wants you to be at the table and help us. And they're responding, so I'm not trying to put a plug in for the government, I'm just saying, they've heard us as well, and they're trying, so.
Thank you, Director Rogers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess before I start my comments, I will say I appreciate that everyone does work very hard here, and I don't question it, and I don't, and I appreciate that you're being transparent and in bringing forward when you're wanting to hire new staff. I mean, I would maintain you need to, you have to do that, right? Yeah, it is transparent of you, but it's part of the job. You're asking for new staff, you come to the board, and I think what, I won't put words in Director Fox's mouth, he said it himself, but I feel similarly in the sense, I don't have a clear sense of what a governance officer is going to do. I got a little bit clearer sense when you mentioned it there. I treat, when I'm looking at this budget, I'm treating it the exact same as when we're about to go through a city of Fredericton budget, and every single little item is scrutinized. And what gets scrutinized most really is staff. And because we all know what a one-year contract turns into, they often just get absorbed and suddenly they just become part of operations. And I'm not convinced. I find the organization extremely top heavy, given the size of the organization and the number of staff. I find it a top heavy organization. I do realize that operations is within your purview, but I think an organization's staff structure is something that the board is able to comment on. I find it top heavy. And so when I'm looking at that, I think somewhere in there, governance work should be being conducted. If it's actually a governance officer, still not sure when you say governance officer, what the governance aspect is. But in any organization I've been involved with, the governance work happens in one of the, I mean, there's a CAO, there's a COO, there's an executive director. Never known an organization to have all those kinds of stuff. But in that, I feel that the governance work should be able to be done. So without knowing more, that's where my thinking lies as well. I have already commented on the community development work. I don't feel that we know enough of what that work is, or what our role is in that work. Having worked in community, it's endless the amount of work. But until we've clearly defined where we want to sit with that, I think it's premature to be hiring a staff person there. So that's my two concerns. It has nothing to do with the amount that people are working, how hard people are working, the integrity of our staff. I mean, you're all great, I mean, that I've worked with. It's not that. But I think it's our responsibility as directors, it's our fiduciary responsibility to be questioning these things.
Yes.
Madam Chair, and through you, and I don't want to belabor the point. Within the organization, we also have to understand that we're serving a population of 137,000 people. Is the organization top heavy? I don't think so. We changed some titles, but we never increased anybody's compensation for that. They were at levels that they were there before. They were already existing within the organization. Within that, people took on more work and more roles to do that. And we changed it so that we could fit people in so that when they were calling out, and I'll pick on Fort Brett here tonight, when you're calling out and you're talking to somebody through, about a regional aquatic center, and they're talking to the director of the solid waste division, they're wondering why. So we had to create that breath to understand where they were coming. Within that they had that credence to talk about what they were talking about, and they had the level to do it. When we look at the staffing, the two staff on the governance officer, as I'd said before, we're looking at, they provide compliance and regulatory oversight, working at a level up and down here through the organization. Policy development and implementation goes to, I'd said this before, but it goes to Director Forsyth. It once mentioned about when do the financial policies get reviewed? When do they come out? When are they going to be? How are we going to do this? This person will certainly help bring these to the forefront with clear timelines and frameworks and everything around them. Our governance framework support. There are more reporting requirements. There's going to be a new conflict of interest and code of conduct guide and conflict of interest forms that have to be filed with the commission. That'll be developed through us, through the board and file. They'll be looking at our risk management, which is often something that comes up right across the board. What's our risk on these things? Training and awareness primarily for the board and the development of our board together. The many members have come to me after meetings and said, hey, we'd like to start getting more non-transactional time together, whether that be a meal before the board meeting, whether that be an off-site event, to get to know one another and to really build the team and camaraderie among that. We'll want to do that. We would, and get that done. They'll be looking at helping with reporting and documentation and, assist the board, the Director of Board Operations, Kelly, to maintain accurate and comprehensive records, work with Wendy and the team, prepare regular reports for senior management, and working with stakeholder engagement. And we have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us that's going to require stakeholder engagement and outreach. Sometimes I call on some of you to help in those communities, and sometimes I call on, we need staff to be able to do that. So that's what a governance officer in a nutshell works on, that policy frame, if you will, right across all lines and helping to develop.
Tough question.
Yes,
I like what you just said. I have no problem with what you just said. What I have a problem, not a problem, is the title you put on that person. That gets everybody here jumped up on governance, whether it's compliance officer or compliance or, but that when governance comes up, that's got everybody.
Interest of time.
That's what I'm saying. It's called knowing everybody around this table, and you're bringing an employee that's going to, and it's all good what you're doing with that. The governance is not, that's not a governance. It's more compliance issue. Like I just went through a compliance audit with someone. In my office, we have compliance officers all over the place to make sure everybody's doing things right. Right. So I just think the title aspect, because I said last year, and I'll say this year, that budget presentation this year was a lot better than last year. And you've learned from that. And it's your budget. If we don't like what's happening, you're gone, basically, because you're putting everything into perspective. I don't think that's my job as a board member to say, if you come across that we're hiring this, it works in our budget, we have the dollars and cents. Now, I did like what he thought, saying that, I like to see what Moncton does and everything else. That just figures. I always say figures lie and liars figure, but that's one of my expressions. But that aspect is you can actually see, because it's a great budget. You guys worked hard. We're saving money. Everything in there. My question would be, compared to last year, the percent on the percentage back. I'd say that last year it was everybody's in uproar. But that's the same thing. I like to know, but everything's gone down. So I think you're doing a good job. And the two positions, if they help out with the thing, I would change that name of that thing, because that's what caused a lot of people, I think. I really would. So that's just me.
that has been so noted. Change the name. Okay, we're gonna, yes, no, I know, yes.
Okay, yeah. Dr. Rogers and Dr. Fox's points, I think are valid and important. And as we work through the budget process, but for me, I want to know what won't happen if we don't do it. And the board then has to accept that. When the board makes a decision to not do something, not fund something, to not be responsible for doing a piece of work, then that has to be noted and the work doesn't get done. So a committee doesn't have support that they need, a consultant isn't available to deliver a product. And I think that's in future budget deliberations, those are pieces that we will have to build in a little stronger, so that you're doing an excellent job of explaining what is going to happen. But it is always a little bit of a soft area, but I'd just like to hear next year, I guess, can we do that? If we don't do this, then when I call Lonnie, he's gonna say, I'm sorry, we can't do that until 2027. Because we don't have the resources just to respond to your question, your need, what happens then.
Just a quick comment,
Yes.
from this side of the table. It's not Mr. Smith's budget, it's our budget. He's putting together, him and his staff's putting together on our behalf. I'm amazed that here we are going into government reform for coming up, the third year coming up, with all the stuff the province has dumped on us. And the commission is doing it for us. Imagine if each and every one of our communities had to do what the government dumped on us by ourselves, what it would be costing us. So I'm amazed that Mr. Smith and his crew are doing such a great job as they are. I mean, to hire 2 additional staff to complete what they're doing, what's been dumped upon them by the provincial government. This, to me, I'm just amazed. I think they're doing a wonderful job. And you can't take on all that extra, all those extra duties and responsibilities without hiring more staff. And that's my 2 cents on it. I'm
Thank
very
you.
pleased with what we're doing.
Director Cleveland or Director Nicklin, do you have anything to add to the conversation?
No comment at this time.
I'm also fine at this time.
Thank you.
I just have one.
Yes,
Being on the finance committee, we had 2 meetings. Every municipality was saving money on this budget. And that's why the committee decided to bring this to the board, because they thought this was an excellent budget and everybody was saving at the end of the day. It's all I'll say.
thank you. So, yes,
Really short,
okay.
really short. Said right at the beginning of this presentation, it was good news budget. I just want to make it a better news budget.
So noted. No further comments? No? No comment? No, okay. Well, we really appreciate the presentation tonight and all the work that has gone into it. So now we do have a motion on the floor.
We will have in a moment. It's, and I believe this is noted, this is a decision, this decision is an administrative matter and requires a simple majority. We're just saying, move this forward. I move that the board forward the proposed draft 2025 budget and proposed borrowings to the members of the Capital Region Service Commission that are municipalities and to the rural district and to the ministry in accordance with section 28 of the Regional Service Delivery Act for their review. And that the chair call a special meeting of the board for Thursday, October 24, 2024, to consider the draft budget in accordance with section 27 of the Regional Service Delivery Act.
Any discussion? So I just have a comment or a question. So if this does get approved tonight, then we can take it back to our municipalities. And will there be a meeting set up with the CEOs and the finance people?
Madam Chair, yes, the meeting, I believe, is already scheduled for September 17th. We were trying to move that date to provide a little bit longer runway, but it wasn't feasible with the scheduling. So there's a CIO meeting scheduled for September 17th, and we will be providing a presentation at that time.
Thank you. No further discussion? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Any opposed? So noted, just the one? Okay. So it has been passed, the motion has been passed. Okay, thank you. Now. Run a little over, but I would like to have this wrapped up by 9, so we don't have to have a special motion on the floor. So I need a motion to go into closed session.
So